Welcome to the Music Man Project podcast. I'm David Stanley, known as the Music Man. I run the Music Man Project, a charity which promotes accessible music education across the UK and around the world for people with learning disabilities. Now, in this second episode, we meet the famous Wendy Wu, star of the National Lottery TV advert, 3 is the Magic Number. And then I talk to Music Man Project charity director Natalie Bradford about her research at the Royal College of Music. We hope you enjoy the show. You can find out more by visiting our website, The Music Man Project, or you can follow us on Facebook and our blog, themusicmanblog.com. Enjoy the show. Well, everybody, I am delighted to welcome our most famous guest so far on the Music Man Project podcast here. It is the wonderful Wendy Wilson. Well, Wendy. Look at that, Wendy. You even get string sound effects on my piano. Listen, Wendy, you are known as Wendy Wu, affectionately known as Wendy Wu. You are an absolute star of the Music Man Project, one of our most famous music ambassadors. How are you feeling, and how, Wendy, are you coping with all this isolation?
Actually, fantastic, because I'm using this man called Stanley, and he is a good man, and I'm really enjoying actually at home, actually.
Good.
Because I'm doing my cooking today with my mum.
Now, Wendy,
yeah.
You will be known to millions of people around the country that because you appeared on a very famous TV advert for the National Lottery, which started 3 is the Magic Number. It's to celebrate their 25th birthday, and you do the opening line as a solo. So, Wendy, tell us about how does it feel to be seen on the TV screens and cinema screens all across the country?
I think it's amazing because everyone will say, "Oh, right, thanks, Wendy."
Yes.
And I can't believe it's incredible. Really, it's incredible because it's like a 3 magic number is actually amazing, and it's something you can do something about it. And when I did that, and another thing I did is my name is Wendy, and my favourite number is 2 because I have a twin.
Yes, you do have a twin. You do have a twin, don't you? That's right. And so you talked about that when they asked you about what was your magic number.
Yes.
And that's great. Well done. So now I was there with you, and if anybody, the listeners, have seen the advert, which I'm sure they have, there's a man jumping up and down in the bottom right-hand corner of your TV screens in the white DJ, going a bit mad, and that's me jumping up and down, and that's all I got to be in the advert. I didn't open the advert like you, Wendy, and Graeme and Sam, the other stars of the advert from the Music Man Project.
But it's not just that, really. Where I just got on there and with Graeme and Sam.
Yes.
But it's not just. It's wonderful. It's lovely.
Yes.
But without Dave, Stanley and Jenny making me laugh so much, it's been lovely.
Well, it was a good day. Well, to sort of explain, we filmed, for about 4 days, I think, 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
Filming, and the very long days. You had to say that line, 3 is a magic number. Oh goodness me, how many times? Hundreds of times. And it was quite pressure because you had to get it right. You had to be in the right place, looking at the right camera, and getting the tune and all that. So Jenny and I had to sort of keep you entertained and keep you positive, didn't we?
Yes, and make me laugh so much, and it's amazing what you guys do to make us laugh. It's amazing.
Well, no, you're the amazing one, Wendy. Now, it was it was great, wasn't it? Because we met someone very famous. Who did we meet that we just I know all of you absolutely adored him, and he adored you. Can you remember? Yeah. Michael Gracie. And why is he? Can you remember why he's famous, Wendy?
Because he reacted with Greatest Showman.
He directed The Greatest Showman. That deserves one of these. He did. He's so famous. I mean, he's worked with Hugh Jackman, amongst loads of other famous actors and choreographers and other people in the industry. And what an amazing film The Greatest Showman is. But the director of The Greatest Showman was Michael Gracie, who directed you in the 3 is a Magic Number advert for the National Lottery. And I just want to say on behalf of the Music Man Project, for Michael that's listening and everybody else at Camelot, the National Lottery, thank you for everything that you did to make our students feel so welcome. Because, Wendy, didn't you have such a wonderful time? And weren't you treated like the professional stars that you are?
I think it's amazing to be a star and be a fan.
Yeah.
And I think it's lovely to have people who, you know, the opportunity to do that.
Yes.
When you, because I helped out with things like Sam, because Sam Hater did something, but instead I said it's an opportunity we can't actually miss. We have to do this.
It's an opportunity, yeah. It's lovely, Wendy.
Very, you know, enjoying ourselves and how good we are at it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, I mean, what you just said there is wonderful. You just said to me, and I think that you're so right, it's an opportunity you couldn't miss, and it's a chance to show everybody how good you are and what you can do. And that's what I was saying there with how well you were treated by everybody on set for the advert, from the casting agents right through to the famous director. They were just absolutely wonderful with you and with all of us. Because, to be honest, Wendy, I'd never been on a set like that before, certainly of that size. And so it was just fantastic, wasn't it, to have that opportunity to show people what you can do. Oh, Wendy, you are such a superstar. We all love you. Now, Wendy, what's it like being an ambassador for the Music Man Project?
I think it's really good. It teaches people. I teach people what we do with things, and I think it's really nice to be a student ambassador. Yeah. And it fills me confidence to do it.
Well, that's great. So to explain to the listeners that the student ambassadors are the leading performers of the Music Man Project. They're the most experienced and very, very hard-working, very enthusiastic, and they really spread the message themselves about music education and performance for people with special needs. And Wendy, that has taken you to all sorts of places. Where did we've been to Scotland, haven't we? Teaching.
Yes,
where else did we go recently?
We went to Wales.
Wales, yes. We took there. And where did we go just before the virus outbreak? We went to Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, didn't we?
Northern Ireland, that was amazing.
That was good to hear. We flew in a plane and all around in England to try to set up new Music Man projects. But obviously...
Oh, and schools.
Yes, and schools
we go to.
Yes, you've been performing to children. 10,000 children we've reached that we've been performing to over the last year. And what's that like, Wendy, to perform to the young children?
It's really good. The young children can have the opportunity to see what we do when we play our instruments and things what they can have good skills.
Yeah, that's right. And I've always saying they treat you lot like rock stars. The young primary school children look up to the Music Man ambassadors, and treat you like rock stars. It's just wonderful. And Wendy, whenever you're doing some music like high, low, middle, when there's a bit of dancing, what do you always do? Who do you always find to dance with?
That's only when you always keep saying, David, that other people as well.
Well, I know, but it's quite funny.
And that's only if it's for a man.
You always find your man. Wendy always finds a nice, handsome-looking teacher to go and dance with at these schools. It's very, very funny. Wendy, it's been an absolute delight to speak to you, and thank you for giving up your time to come on the second ever episode of the Music Man Project podcast. And I've really, really enjoyed talking to you. Is there anything else you want to say to all your listeners and fans out there?
To say how amazing everyone is. Be careful about this virus.
Yeah.
But I will always say, just enjoy yourself and looking after yourself. Be happy, be joyful, and I think what you can do.
Oh, Wendy, you heard it here. That's the beginning of your little theme song. Those that remember our last episode of the podcast when we interviewed Daniel Camacho, we played his theme song. Well, whenever Wendy Wilson is in our music session, we do the song from Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Any Dream Will Do, because her nickname is Wendy Wu. So we all go, Any Woo Will Do. And then Wendy usually does a wonderful dance on the floor, don't you, Wendy, in your Technicolor jumper?
So I definitely do.
You definitely do. It's wonderful to speak to you. Thank you, Wendy. And we will see you again, hopefully very soon, when all this isolation business is done with. Thank you, Wendy. Goodbye.
Goodbye. But Dave, can I talk to you without the podcast?
Yes, you can. Go on then. I'm here.
Anyway, I was going to say, how are you? And I miss you.
Well, I'm all right. I'm finding myself, quite bored. So I'm not doing lots of Music Man Project things, lots of radio interviews and videos. Would you like me to video you sometime to do a one-to-one Music Man session?
You know me, David. Video, it always have to be me.
It would be great. It would be good to do that because I think we've all got to keep ourselves going, haven't we? We've just got to keep the music alive and keep everybody connected through the Music Man Project and the rest of the country, so that they don't get too sad just sitting at home.
No, you just be, joyful, looking after yourself and relaxing.
I love that. Joyful, looking after yourself and relaxing. What a wonderful attitude. And how's Mum? Is she all right? Well, I'm delighted to say that we're joined now by a very important lady. It's the Music Man Project Director of the charity, Natalie Bradford. Natalie, welcome, and I'm so pleased you're one of our guests on the second ever episode of the Music Man Project podcast.
Wow, well, I'm very excited to be on the podcast, and how exciting is this to have this sort of vehicle to use while we're all stuck at home?
Well, that's right. I mean, it's not what I imagined when we first thought about the podcast, but I think actually the timing of it couldn't be better because people can, when they're stuck at home, students, families, and anybody actually can listen to this.
We've almost got a captive audience.
Yes, absolutely. One thing I forgot to do is this. It's Natalie Bradford, everyone. And Natalie, you're affectionately known as Miss Morden, but you're so much more than that. But I do like to call you Miss Morden. So, Natalie, can you tell us your story and how you got involved with the Music Man Project and what you're up to?
Oh, yes, I can. I suppose it was all about 5 years ago now, maybe nearly 6, actually. I'd just finished a music degree. I'd done a second degree as an adult at Colchester Institute, part of the University of Essex. And it came to my graduation and I was sort of mulling over what I was going to do after I'd finished my degree. And I just Googled music and special needs and up popped David's lovely face.
And it didn't put you off. That's good.
And that was my very first awareness of the Music Man Project. I hadn't heard about it before.
No.
I didn't know it was even in existence.
No.
And the first degree that I'd done all those years ago when I was 18 was actually in psychology and education. So I'd always sort of had quite a keen interest in special needs. And then with my added interest in music, it just seemed a perfect combination.
It was, and you sort of said that you hadn't heard anything about the Music Man Project, but of course at that time, although we'd been running a long time in Southend and there was the music school and all the sort of the 20 years and everything, the Music Man project in its form as it is now wasn't well known at all. When you sort of Googled us, it wasn't across the country. It was still essentially me and Jenny in Southend with Southend Main Cap doing something reasonably small, just local, but with big ideas. And so that's quite amazing that you did that. You found us on Google, and then you sort of had the sort of foresight to come in and then sort of say how you could get involved.
And another just a blindside interesting fact, when I was doing my original degree in psychology when I was 18, and I used to do some voluntary summer work, and I actually used to, all those years ago, go into Kingsdown School as a volunteer for their summer holiday club.
See, I love connections like that. Yeah.
So that's a really nice sort of completed loop, isn't it?
Absolutely. And as I think I mentioned to you before, I had a similar loop because Kingsdown School is very close to where I used to live, and I actually was a member of a playbus preschool group that the bus used to park in the Kingsdown School car park. And so as a 2 or 3 year old, I went to preschool there, and then tried to go and do some teaching there after I graduated. And what I was trying to do was too early. I hadn't had any experience and hadn't gone and did a job at all. So I didn't get anywhere. And then 10 years later, I was there back. And as you know, Music Man Project teaches at Kingsdown School as a very big feature of its work now. So I think it's lovely that those connections. I wonder if it must be about Kingsdown School.
It must be, yes.
It's fascinating. So I love that. And it shows that all those years ago, you were just laying a seed for what was going to happen in the future by working at Kingsdown.
And it's just very strange to go back there now, all those years later.
Yes, I know. And in fact, this week I've been singing to some of their children, and so it's lovely on the video calls.
Yes, I've seen some of those.
Yeah.
Happy faces on Facebook with you in your tux.
In my tux, and I don't want to disappoint you and just ruin the image, but I'm not in my tux at the moment. I have decided to take it off as this is a podcast. So
full concert gear.
As in, no one's going to see me. I won't ask you what you're wearing because that sounds a bit odd. Anyway, let's moving on. So Natalie, so what did you do? So you came to see us.
So I came to see you. Yes, it was over the summer. So when you restarted back in September. The very first session I came along to was a Thursday afternoon.
Right. Yes, at Benfleet.
And I just sort of observed and thought, well, I knew straight away, actually.
Did you?
I thought, this is something I can definitely work with, and in fact would love to work with. And
you did it.
And I think we had a chat about it, didn't we? And
yes, in those days it was like, well, there wasn't any other centre, because I think it's very important the listeners understand that this idea that the Music Man Project has expanded and loads of other people singing our songs and doing our music and performing with us from all over the country and now the rest of the world. At the time that Natalie started, there was no other model. It was just, as I said before, me and Jenny just teaching in Southend, and we didn't know if it was possible. And so you started up the first ever satellite Music Man Project at a regional centre where you're doing it away from Southend without any regular teaching input at all. It was your project. So
which was a really sort of exciting step, wasn't it? I think I came to your sessions for about 6 months, was it? And
yes, you did. Yes, that's true.
Sort of observed and helped out.
Yes.
And just sort of became part of the Music Man family.
Yes.
And then off I went to sunny Morden. And,
I know, which is great.
we started with about three or four students.
Yes.
In quite a small room, and so now we're up to about probably 15.
Yeah, and your students are such a great bunch, and I hope they can hear this from me saying that they are wonderful, because you've stuck with them and they've stuck with you through thick or thin.
And they have been so committed. They have right from the start.
And a very different group in Malden, aren't they? In terms of the demographic.
By and large, they are. Yes.
Very different. But they've carried on going, and they have been in all of the concerts really since you started up. All the big events. They performed with us at the Palladium. Your students have performed at the Albert Hall, of course, and lots of other events in between. Both in Southend and in London.
And they really enjoy it.
Yeah.
The performing aspect.
Yeah.
That is a big thing for them, I think.
Absolutely. No, they're wonderful.
I mean, many of them had never even been to London before they'd done the show. So
no, it's amazing, isn't it?
They were really excited about that.
So they are credit to you, and it's lovely that group is continuing, and the first regional group is still going strong. Now, apart from that, because you've got many strings to your bow, and you are a violinist, is the work you've been doing at the Royal College of Music. Could you just tell the listeners briefly what it is you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. Right, well, I have been looking at how music, and when I say music, I mean actually doing music like our Music Man music, how that can support the well-being of adults with Down syndrome. And that's been quite an ongoing long project. I've done that over the last 5 years. Wow. And I'm just coming towards the end of it. I've just been writing my conclusion, which is very exciting, as you can imagine.
Yes, it's exciting for everybody, yes.
That's basically it in a nutshell. Yeah. It's been 3 main studies that have combined to answer this sort of main question.
Yes.
The first being, I studied for about a year, maybe just over a year, 4 students of the Music Man project that are long, well-established students, and I sort of followed their musical endeavours for a year.
Yes.
And wrote up case studies on those. I interviewed them. I interviewed their families, their friends, Music Man project staff.
Yes.
So I got some really wonderful feedback from them, and that makes a very, very interesting and lovely read, the chapter of that in my PhD. And then the second study was a survey which I sent to all the MenCap partner groups in the UK, of which there are over 400.
Yes.
To get their view on music, if they were using it, how they're using it, and if they're not using it, why they're not using it. And that was very interesting, actually, that about 75% of MenCap groups are using music in some form.
Yes.
But what that tends to be is listening to music rather than actually doing it.
Yes.
They do use singing to an extent, but it is predominantly listening to music or karaoke type things. There's very little use of instruments, very little opportunity to perform. So that was really quite revealing, that. And of course, almost a quarter of them are not using music at all. No. So that's a whole
thousands upon thousands
to
of
look
people.
at.
Yes.
So that was interesting to sort of get their view on why they were not using more music. And the biggest barrier that came out, which was really significant, was that their staff didn't feel confident to deliver music.
Yes.
Which sort of made my ears prick up.
Yes.
So I think, well, that's something we can...
That's right, yeah.
Certainly help in the future. So that, that's possibly one avenue that could be explored. And then my third study, which was, I suppose, the real research bit of it, was I used about 25 adults with Down syndrome, and they came along to 10 weeks of teaching from you, David, didn't they?
They did, yes.
These guys have, by and large, not done Music Man regularly.
No.
Or recently. So they were fresh to it, and I recorded their well-being scores using various measures over the 10-week period to see how they changed, if in fact they changed. And I also recorded within each session, so at the beginning of week 1 and then at the end of week 1, as well as over the longitudinal aspect. And very excitingly, the results on that were outstandingly
were they?
Conclusive.
Yes.
In that Music Man and music is very beneficial, as we all know, for well-being.
Wonderful.
So that's the main sort of three studies that I am just pulling together.
Yes.
So there's sort of three completely different aspects. There's the aspect of our guys that have been doing music for a long time and how it's affected their lives and their families.
Yes.
The view of MenCap, which, as we know, is the largest UK charity supporting people with learning disabilities. And then finally there was the 10-week intervention study, which looked at students that hadn't done music and how that could then benefit them.
And I had, that's brilliant. Thank you. And I'm excited to see this report because I have to declare there that this research is entirely your own. It's entirely objective. You might be a director for the Music Man project, but actually if the results had shown that it wasn't working at all, you couldn't disguise that fact. You have to, don't you, in your PhD. This is a PhD at the Royal College of Music, and so we're all, I have not seen the results. I'm anticipating with great excitement what they will show. Am I right in saying, Natalie, that when you were doing your research stage of this in terms of what is already out there, you found that you really have hit upon something quite unique in what you're doing? Is that correct?
It is. This is the first study, actually, that looks at music and the sort of overall aspect of well-being. There's been a few studies in the past which have sort of looked at bits of it, like anxiety or social isolation or communication, but this is actually the first study that has looked at music, well-being and Down syndrome all together. So it is totally original in that sense. And it's interesting because the well-being measures I use to sort of record the well-being, there are actually none available, none validated for people with learning disabilities at all.
Extraordinary.
So I've actually had to use some measures that were originally designed for people with dementia. And the fact that they've actually worked well, I'm hoping might lead on to them then being validated for people with learning disabilities as well, because it's so important to have these measures.
And that's very important, because if you've adapted these, is that what you're saying? You've adapted these measures for people with learning disabilities, and then other people might use your measures. That's great. It could be known as the Bradford Index or something really cool like that. That'd be amazing. Oh, well, listen, congratulations. And I know it's not finished yet, but I know from what you've said to me before that it has been going very well, and that everyone at the Royal College have been very pleased with you. And so fingers crossed that continues, and good luck with this important work.
Well, the Royal College have been really supportive. They've been
great.
Right behind it the whole way, which was really good to see, because it was an area of research that they hadn't experienced before.
No.
It was sort of good timing, really, because they'd recently done some research on mental health, and they'd done some on dementia and postnatal depression, and then I sort of pop up with my wanting to do something with learning disabilities, so it sort of slotted in really well.
They've got the complete picture then, yes. And it's important to say as well, isn't it, that this is music education in terms of it's
absolutely.
Doing it
not therapy,
not your one-to-one therapy. Yeah. Well, that's
we're
fantastic.
Talking about the group classes, typically like the regular Music Man weekly sessions, where there's maybe 15 people in a group, spending a couple of hours having fun, but learning at the same time.
But learning, very important. Well, it's been an honour to support you with the research, and believe you me, we've gained so much, and I know we will continue from having somebody with your expertise as part of the team, because I think it makes a huge difference. And indeed, apart from all the research, with your help, we were able to do a performance at the Royal College of Music a few years ago, weren't we?
Didn't we? Yes, that was great fun.
There was a seminar with the undergraduates there. So, and I think it's like I was interviewing Wendy Wilson, Wendy Wu, the ambassador from the Music Man Project earlier, and we were commending the National Lottery in Camelot and how well they looked after our students with learning disabilities.
Yeah.
And so it is also equally important, as you've just said, to say thank you to the Royal College of Music for their foresight and kindness and respect to show people with learning disabilities and what you're trying to do. I think it's really good, because it might not have always been the case with some of these organisations, but they're taking the lead, aren't they?
They were very, very welcoming and very open. So
that's great. Good.
But I think the biggest thank you, though, is, of course, has got to go to you, David, and the students.
Well, that's very kind.
Because without your help and without the hugely generous giving of time of the students and their families, of course, this research would never have happened.
I think that we all realise the importance of it, and I found in my years of working with them, they love the chance to tell their story, and they love they feel empowered by it, because I think they must struggle a lot, and some of the students must get ignored a lot. So for the chance for somebody of your standing to come from the Royal College of Music and say, what is the impact of the music and the education? How is it affecting your life? And all the stuff that you've been talking about. The chance for them to have that central role in your research is incredibly important and empowering. So, it's
and there's no better place to have your voice than the Royal College of Music.
No, which it voted the finest conservatory in the world, I think.
Yes.
Wow.
But
how wonderful.
No, they really rose to the occasion, I think.
Good. Well, I get more excited every time I think about your report, and how many words? Because you see, as you know, I came back from New York and had to write a report of my research, which in comparison with what you've had to do over 5 years is nothing.
So how long was your report?
Do you know what? It ended up as being 42 pages with lots of pictures. but how many? I can't remember what the word limit was. But how many words is your PhD?
I'm up to about 90,000 words at the moment, which is about 500 pages. So
wow. You see,
with not that many pictures. There's quite a lot of pictures in the case study
of
chapter.
Course. Yes.
But I'm afraid the rest of it's not many pictures.
90,000 words. So look, depending on how long this period of isolation goes on for, and if we're here this time next year, when somebody could spend the time
still isolated,
reading 90,000 words of Natalie Bradford, I shall certainly be reading those words. Listen, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for your continued work now as the director of the Music Man Project charity, the
pleasure.
national charity. It's great. We've come so far, and the next dream, obviously, in case people aren't aware, is to go to Broadway one day. So we hope we achieve that together. And Natalie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Well, before we let you go, Natalie, we like to ask a guest for a favourite piece of music, and ideally a Music Man Project song. So what would your choice be?
Well, I don't have to think very long about that one. It's the very first song that I heard on that Thursday afternoon when I came to visit for the very first time. It's High, Low, Middle.
Ah, fantastic. Okay, everybody, here is Natalie's choice, the classic Music Man Project song, High, Low, Middle.
We strum our guitars, we blow our trumpets, we shake our maracas, and then we sing our song. It goes high, low, middle, high, low, middle, high, low, middle, high, low, low. And again sing high, low, middle, high, low, middle, high, low, middle, high, low, low. Music, we love to play music. We Gangnam Style.
High low.
Gangnam Style.
High low.
Gangnam Style.
High low.
Gangnam Style.
High low low. And again sing high low.
Gangnam Style.
High low.
Gangnam Style.
High low.
Gangnam Style.
High low low.
And again say high, low, can, high, low, can, high, low, can, high, low.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Music Man Project podcast. I would like to finish once again with a lovely performance of our theme song, Music is Magic, with Gemma Andrews on the flugelhorn. Thanks to my producer, John Webber. I'm David Stanley. Till next time, it's goodbye.